Hello, everyone who's streaming in. This is Englandia, head of ecosystem growth with Sovryn, the place to be for your Bitcoin DeFi needs. So I'll be facilitating this town hall between Edan Yago, General Catalyst, and of course the Sovryn community. So I'll give you a quick rundown of how this will go. I'll give a brief introduction of Edan Yago, and he'll give an overview of General Catalyst. They'll have a fireside-style discussion of the proposed SIP by General Catalyst on forum.sovryn.app, followed by a Q&A with questions submitted by the audience in the forum post. And then we'll switch it up on the second half of this town hall, where we will discuss the aftermath of Luna and UST's inevitable plummet into nothingness, and how we, as a community of builders, can push DeFi forward from here. So Edan Yago, for those who may not know, is an anti-finance financier and radical optimist who has built companies in the Bitcoin and crypto space, including Cement DAO and Epiphyte, which provided global remittance services. He currently serves as a core contributor to Sovryn, where the majority of his work is geared towards the strategic direction of the project, governance, and adoption. So with that, Yago, please take the floor.
Hey, everyone. It's great to talk to you guys again. And very exciting to be able to invite Nick to speak with us today. The way I got to know Nick was a little bit over a year ago. Nick reached out to one of Sovryn's core contributors, to Armando, and let him know that he was following Sovryn closely. He thought it was super interesting, and would it be possible one day to chat. And a couple of weeks later, I happened to be in Miami for March 2021. I think it was March or April 2021, the Bitcoin conference, and I got to meet Nick in a coffee shop, and we started talking, and we had a long conversation about Bitcoin and about creating alternatives to the existing financial system and the current state of DeFi. And I was really impressed by the way Nick was looking at the space, because my experience, and I'm sure you guys know this as well, most of the people who get interested in DeFi in entirely different, from entirely different motivations than a focus on building fundamentally sound financial systems, which can revolve around fundamentally sound money, which is Bitcoin. And Nick started to describe not only his view, but the view of General Catalyst, which was extremely aligned with what we're trying to do at Sovryn, which is build a world on Bitcoin, with the belief that if we want to create a better future, we need to build on better foundations. We need to build on stable, incorruptible foundations. And that, to his mind, that was only Bitcoin. And so we have stayed in touch since then. And when a few months ago, there started to be conversation about potentially having a round of strategic investors participate in a round with Sovryn, we spoke with Nick again, and Nick had even more information to tell us that that he was looking to work with GC, and that GC more generally were looking to the Bitcoin ecosystem as the most underinvested and most obvious opportunity in the finance and crypto space. And over the course of our conversation, they also expressed an interest to lead a strategic round, or lead this type of strategic round in Sovryn. So this is super cool, not just because we've gotten to know them over a long period of time, and because they're extremely aligned with our view of the world, but also because of who General Catalyst are. This is one of the top investment funds in the world, one of the top VCs. They've invested in companies that have generated something on the order of $1 trillion in value. The people who work at the firm have come from some of the best business backgrounds in the world, and have had a large number of successes building fundamentally important technologies and companies, particularly around the internet from its earlier days. And I think that there's a wealth of understanding there, a wealth of experience, and an impressive network that GC bring with them. And, I think it's a huge stamp of approval for us as a community and for Sovryn as a protocol, not just that General Catalyst are interested, but they're interested in doing this the Sovryn way, doing it through the community and becoming active participants in Sovryn. So with that, I'd like to introduce you guys to Nick Van Eck. It's been really, really great getting to know him, and I'm sure it will be great for the rest of you guys to get to know him and see him more involved in Sovryn in the future.
Thanks, Yago, and appreciate everyone joining and taking the time to listen in today. I think my Bitcoin story really started close to 7 years ago. I come from a family of Austrian economists and gold bugs, and so when I read the Bitcoin white paper for the first time, it really clicked. And I think just having my conversations with Yago and following this community, over time, it just resonated philosophically with my values and how I view the world. And so appreciate the opportunity for GC to get involved more formally and potentially join this community of Sovryns. And Yago, I guess would it be helpful for me to sort of give a background on GC and what we do and where we're focused?
Yeah, I think that would be great.
Great. So GC, we've been around for 22 years. Our two co-founders were entrepreneurs themselves who had built and scaled companies together. It felt they didn't get much out of their relationships other than capital. And so they wanted to build an active firm, a founder-first firm with operators. And so you'll see that in the makeup of GC today. About half the folks here are investors and have investment backgrounds like myself, and the other half come from the operating side of things, whether it's leading, Fortune 500 businesses or, leading the tech teams of those. And some folks include Ken Chenault, who is the CEO of Amex for 17 years, Ken Frazier, who is the CEO of Merck, Paul Sagan, who is the CEO of Akamai, folks on the technical side like Quentin Clark, who was the CTO of Dropbox and SAP, and Steve Herod, who's the CTO of VMware. And so our view is that we take a long-term approach to building, and we want to support founders and communities that are challenging the status quo and partner with companies from the seed and really hatching businesses to the growth stage and beyond. We take a long-term view and understand that inflection points are a natural part of a company's growth or community's growth rather, and that these things take time. And at GC, we try to support our companies by serving as player coaches, leveraging our shared experiences, operators, investors, former founders, and you really get the full team at GC. Specifically, we assist with things like product development, access to partners, customers, talent and team builds, and navigating the successes and challenges that come with community, product, and company building. So that's sort of the high-level overview. Happy to dive into more specifics, Yago, and would let you take it from here.
Yes, I think what we should just do is we've collated the questions, so there's been a lot of active conversation on the different channels, and particularly in the Sovryn forum. And I think, Inglande, if you can just help provide the opportunity for Nick to answer those questions.
Sure. I'm going to take from the forum post. Some of these questions are long, so I'll attempt to shorten them wherever I can. So this is from Walker377. He says, to authorize the incorporation of the company under the laws of BVI to negotiate and sell the SOV tokens to investors. So is this company being set up by General Catalyst or by Sovryn, and what are the reasons for that?
So this company is not being set up by GC. It is being set up by Sovryn as a way to manage sort of the tokens that'll be dispersed and start to build, a legal foundation in case that is necessary at some point in the future.
Okay, awesome. So I'll move on with Bond's question. How does GC intend to vote in the Bitocracy with their allocation of SOV, given that they're philosophically aligned with the project?
Yeah, so I think we intend to be active members of the community like everyone else that's on this town hall right now. And so as part of token ownership, we have the ability to participate in governance, and we will be very active participants going forward. And I think make decisions as a part of the community, and we have our perspectives on things, and we'll use that to be an active participant in the community. I think we're not going to be passive members here.
Okay, awesome. And some people take the view that some cryptocurrency tokens are unregulated securities, and knowing that Sovryn is a fully decentralized project, what is GC's stance on this subject, especially if the SEC ever decides to quote-unquote protect investors?
Yeah, I think we don't really have a comment here. What I will say is that GC is an SEC registered firm, and have a long experience of working within the bounds of the law and with regulators, and will be as supportive as possible to the community going forward.
All right, and as someone previously asked, it would be great to have some details on how General Catalyst plans on helping Sovryn's growth if this investment does go through.
Yeah, so like Yago mentioned, we have a large host of Bitcoiners at GC, and we believe that the Bitcoin ecosystem is one of the most significant untapped opportunities in crypto. It has the largest network, is the most liquid, reliable asset, has leading mind share, and unmatched security. I think we're philosophically aligned with the goals of Bitcoin and the Sovryn network to empower people, promote individual freedom, and achieve broader financial inclusion. As a fund manager, we are long-term thinkers, and so how can we, bring sort of our network and power to bear with Sovryn? I think there's a number of ways. So one of the first things that we're doing is on the marketing side. We have an awesome internal marketing communications team that will help actively support the community, get the Sovryn name out there, and work with journalists and people that can tell the Sovryn story, and share it. And some of these pieces, are underway, and they can't really touch on that quite yet. I think secondly, we have a real world network. There's no crypto asset like Bitcoin that can have the penetration and impact on the real world and real economy. We have experience of partnering and building businesses over the last 2 decades that are quite large, and multi-billion-dollar businesses. And if there's opportunity for partnerships there that can be valuable, whether it's fintechs, individuals, or extended network, we're happy to be helpful. We're talking to founders, where we may not be an investor every single day, and you never know where fruitful partnerships for Sovryn could come up. I think third is our institutional experience of building multi-billion-dollar long-term businesses, and doing the basic blocking and tackling that you need to do for communities and products to grow. This is a very young space. It's funny, and when I was first got into Bitcoin 7 years ago, I thought we were in inning 2. Today, I think we're still in inning number 1, actually. And so there's a lot that'll be done, and these communities and companies and products in the space will evolve over the next 2 decades. And we have the experience from our partners and the operators that we have around the table to actually build sustainable products and communities and navigate things like marketing, products, competitors, and doing the basic blocking and tackling. And then, fourth, I think there's an opportunity to continue to invest in the Sovryn ecosystem outside of, how the tokenomics and the ecosystem fund are structured today, and maybe a separate pool of capital to invest in people that are building on Sovryn, could make sense in the future. And so that's sort of how we're thinking about it and how we can provide value.
All right, fantastic. So as we know, this investment proposal involves a 4-year vesting schedule. What happens after these 4 years?
Yeah, so our view is we're long-term investors. Most of the companies that we invest in and communities that we're involved with, are 7 to 10 plus year time horizons. I think, like I mentioned, that we still feel that we're in inning number 1 of this, right? And so, the vesting schedule is designed in a way so that we can custody, assets over a 4-year period, but that is no intent, signals no intent of what we would do with them, right? We have a long-term view on where this is going and are not in the business of, making short-term decisions or having a short-term view. And so, I understand a lot of folks will be focused on investing. That's the 4-year, I think the 4-year period is not a signal that that's when our involvement in Sovryn would end, right? This is just the beginning of a very long-term project, and we're excited to have the opportunity to potentially join the community and be involved.
Okay, cool. Could you provide some color on the other investors in this round? Because it looks like there's only one RSK address mentioned, and will there only be one single entity voting for this whole syndicate? Can you just provide some more clarity on that?
Yeah, Yago, would you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. So we checked, so we're not able at this point to talk about who else might be joining the round, but I think what's important, and that would basically be finalized after the SIP either passes or fails to pass. In terms of the address, so there will be a separate address associated with any strategic investor. They'll be acting independently. So earlier we mentioned the company being set up. So the company is being set up not by Sovryn, but for Sovryn. So it's being set up by a professional, a company which sets up SPVs or special purpose vehicles, specifically for the purpose, you guys know that Sovryn has no entity, no corporate entity. And the strategic investors who are interested in this round, they do have corporate entities. And so they need some kind of counterparty with whom to have an agreement. And so that counterparty is the SPV, the special purpose vehicle. Once that occurs, each investor will receive their own allocation, and these investors are unaligned. So they, or at least there's no official alignment between them, certainly not through the company, and they will each operate independently. One other important thing to point out is that there is a limit on how much any one party, and this has always been the case, can acquire either through programmatic sales or through the exchequer, and that limit is designed in order to make sure that there are no dominant players who have decisive voting power within Bitocracy, and that will continue to be the case. So, for example, were General Catalyst or one of the other investors to look to participate in a future round, they would only be able to participate up until the cap, which is 4.5%.
All right, thanks for the clarity there. From SOV_hooligan, he says, thanks for proposing the SIP. And do you envision your portfolio companies to use upcoming Sovryn products such as Zero, perpetual swaps, or dropper NFTs?
Yeah, so I touched on this a little bit earlier. I think, as sort of the product suite expands, there's an opportunity for Sovryn to certainly be embedded in companies that may not even be GCs, and they may be our portfolio companies in the future. But I certainly think there's an opportunity for companies to use products that Sovryn's created in the future. And right, this goes back to not just portfolios within our network that could be potential candidates, but I think companies that we're talking to on a daily basis that aren't even in our portfolio, where Sovryn might be a great solution for them.
All right, this one's from CryptHut. I will try to shorten this. What kind of thought went into the formatting of this proposal with the 4-year mark and the 1-year cliff? And I suppose, yeah, why do you see that as a fitting arrangement between GC and Sovryn?
Yeah, so from a traditional venture perspective, right, we take custody or ownership, right, in equities on day one. I think we are trying to be aligned with the community and sort of the crypto ecosystem and how these things are structured. And we felt this was a fair structure, right? We're not able to stake our tokens in year one and earn those staking rewards, which would be quite significant given the current APY. And so we felt this was a very fair way and a community-friendly way for us to get involved. Again, I don't think it certainly doesn't signal an intent that will be the end of our involvement. I think this is just the beginning and, potentially decade-plus long story.
Okay, and the second part to CryptHut's question is, how do you or the other investors of GC feel towards the GIMP package SIP proposal? I'm not sure if you were versed on that, but I just wanted to voice that because that was what he asked.
Yeah, we've certainly seen GIMP's package, and it's impressive. I think there's a lot of good points in the proposals, and there's 4, soon to be 5, and I think they absolutely merit discussion. I think probably right now is not the best time to get into the points of all of them, as there are many separate pieces. But we're excited to be engaged in those discussions, and I think there's a lot of good points that were made.
Okay, so that wraps it up for the questions from the forum thread. And we're 30 minutes in. Should we take some time to maybe field some of the questions from the other listeners here, Iago, or should we move on to the second half?
I think if people want to ask questions, people who are on the spaces right now would be a great time for you guys. You can just request to be a speaker, and we can let you join. And while you're doing that, maybe I'll just point out that I think one of the most exciting things here is, I think, a big benefit that Sovryn can bring, and that we've been trying to bring from day one, is the ability to grow an ecosystem of more decentralized, more trustless services, toolings, and products around Bitcoin, so that Bitcoin doesn't just exist as a decentralized money, but can also be used as the basis for a decentralized economy. And one of the exciting things about working with General Catalyst is that not only do they bring a network of companies that they have invested in or are looking to invest in and will invest in the future, but also that I think it's a huge opportunity for Sovryn in that General Catalyst, in looking to make their foray into Bitcoin and the Bitcoin ecosystem, have chosen to do so with Sovryn, but not only with Sovryn. And that as additional projects merit investment from GC, that will help us work with GC and those projects to build an ecosystem around Sovryn. and I think it's that type of coordination and collaboration which to a great extent has been missing in terms of the developer culture in Bitcoin, and that we hope to help encourage and grow. If there aren't questions, and it looks, I don't, do you see questions? I might not be seeing them.
I had one gentleman by the name of Schneider request to speak, and I added him, and then I think he crashed or something. So he just rejoined, and I sent you, Schneider, an invitation to speak. So please accept if you have something you'd like to ask. Also, the floor is open for anyone who'd like to step up and ask a question. And I have one also Satoshi Badger, who has now been invited to speak. Did you have a question, Satoshi Badger?
Yeah, I'm just wondering when is there a timeline for when this is going to go to vote?
Yes. So given that there is sensitivity around the 30-day TWAP and the setting of prices around this, we expect to have the vote on Wednesday, which allows us to have had a full week for public comment, questions, and debate within the community, and then as well, in addition to that, the additional 2 days of the voting. And so we expect that the SIP would go up to vote on this coming Wednesday.
Okay, first comes, first serve. Would love to have your comments, audience, so feel free to just raise your hands. I got one request here.
Yeah, and I think
David Roy.
I think after this, if there aren't additional questions, then we should thank Nick for his time, and we can move, allow him to, get on with his day, and we can move on to the next topic.
Cool. So, David, would you like to ask your question?
I guess generally I was just wondering, Nick, when you guys went through your due diligence and everything, were there any parts of Sovryn that gave you guys pause, that made you kind of consider the investment a little more deeply, or that maybe made it possibly not happen?
Yeah, I would say in any investment, right, there's things that we diligence and there's risks involved. I think one of the most important things about crypto generally, right, is you have to have awesome products and you have to have an awesome community. And we felt that Sovryn is building, very important, technically sound products on Bitcoin and has one of the strongest Bitcoin communities. And so those were the two things that really were encouraging for us and why we decided to get involved. I think with any project or product or community or company, there's always challenges, that need to be worked through. I think there's nothing that was a red flag, but I think there's always things that can be improved, right? Whether it's the product suite, marketing, communication, branding. And so, we're looking forward to helping out the Sovryn community and being involved as much as we can be.
Great. And then I have one more follow-up on the actual investment terms. I think 4-year lockup is amazing and a vote of confidence for sure. How did you guys come up with the 1-year cliff? And what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, so that came about through just conversations with us and the team, and I think we were trying to structure it in a way that was similar to how other deals are structured within the crypto community, and felt that was a fair way to structure it. Yago, is there anything else that you would add?
Yeah, I think that initially, actually, I believe it was Sovryn Exchequer who proposed the 4-year with the 1-year cliff, and I think it's a little bit more severe actually than what you would typically see in the crypto space. In two ways. First of all, there's the 1-year cliff as part of the 4-year deal. And then the second thing is due to SIP 24, until general catalysts start vesting, they don't earn the rewards that liquid stakers are earning. But typically in a VC deal, the tokens would have been provided upfront. However, this is a bit of a weird, at least very different type of space where projects effectively have liquid tokens and trading markets from day one rather than waiting 10, 15 years for an IPO. And so it was necessary to strike the right balance between providing any investor with immediate access and participation rights in Bitocracy, while at the same time avoiding the potential for misaligned incentives, where there are investors out there who would seek to, on an opportunistic basis, take short-term view on the project. Sovryn has this great mechanism of long-term staking, and so effectively what we did is we utilized the Bitocracy staking mechanism and introduced and we'll be introducing the investors as long-term holders of this. And the 1 year plus 3 years is basically matching what we would see with the with a maximal staking period of 3 years. So we created the 1 year cliff and then the maximal staking period of 3 years.
Great. And then my final question, and then I'll drop off. This is something I should know, but Iago, do you know where are we allocating these tokens from? From which fund? From the Adoption Fund, Development Fund, or what?
So these are being allocated from the Adoption Fund, and that was based on the previous step. I think it was 6 weeks ago. We passed this of transferring SOV that had been unlocked from the Adoption Fund to the Exchequer, with the goal, with the view of potentially providing them for a strategic investment round of this kind.
Great. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Ingemar, I think Ferric also had a question.
I was going to ask if anyone wanted to expand on what direction do you really see feature-wise that you want to expand on with this whole deal? Is there anything specific that you'd like to bring to Sovryn that isn't currently on the pathway?
So I think there's a pretty expansive product roadmap. Iago, I don't know how much you want to share about that, and I think we feel pretty good about it. I think as the ecosystem and DeFi evolves, there may be things that are critically important to have or build, and we're going to be helpful and I think sort of diligencing the market and figuring out what needs to be prioritized and what doesn't, right? Based on activity, I think in DeFi as a whole, beyond just what Sovryn is immediately focused on.
Yeah, I'll just add to that the roadmap as it is set out and as it has been presented isn't changing, but rather will be supported by this investment. And a big part of the investment is to make sure that we, in the Sovryn Treasury, have the funds available to make sure that we can achieve the roadmap as it is set out. Now, roadmaps change, and there'll be input from GC or other investors because that's part of the value that they can bring, as well as input from the community, as there has always been on an ongoing basis. But there's nothing secret or new or special about the roadmap. What has been presented to the community, and what there's always we always seek to the degree possible, provide communication, which means that everyone is aware of all the things that are going on, because the mechanisms with which we speak to the community are the same mechanisms with which we communicate with each other, both in terms of internally to the core team and between core team and the various ecosystem teams that are working on Sovryn. Bottom line, the goal is to support our current plans.
All right. Do we have one more question, or do we have time for one more question, Nick? It's up to you. If you must run, it's cool. But we have Floppy, who's requested to speak.
Yeah, we have time for one more question.
Cool. Floppy, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying that this seems to be a huge opportunity for Sovryn, and I'm super happy that this is probably going through, but I just wanted to ask Nick about, you seem to be pretty aligned with being a part of the community, and I was wondering about these community circles that we've been seeing started in Sovryn, for example, the Circle of Tokens. Do you have any thoughts about participating in these circles going forward? And because I guess that could be a pretty valuable thing that you could bring to the table.
Yeah, I think we're absolutely open to being involved in the future.
Yeah, so you would be part of different circles that might be started.
I think we'd have to look at them specifically, and so I can't comment on that now, but I think we're excited to be involved and engaged.
Okay, thank you. That's great.
Okay, so that wraps up our Q&A. Many thanks to Nick from General Catalyst. Hopefully we can get this sipped through and move forward as a community.
Great. And I just want to quickly say thank you everyone for listening in, and we're excited about the prospect of potentially joining the Sovryn community.
Awesome. Yeah, appreciate having you.
Thanks very much. Great having you. Stay sovereign, and we will now be switching over to our second topic, which is sound finance and Sovryn and learnings from Luna.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
All right, take care. All right, so we'll be discussing what's been transpiring over the past few days with the Luna crash, as well as the fall of their UST stablecoin peg, which has been known to offer the highest APY yield for a while now, but based on an unsustainable model. It has garnered the attention of many regulators, perhaps to our detriment. And I think there's a lot we can learn from it. And Iago, I'm sure you have some thoughts on that. And it would be great to have another discussion and some more questions from the community on this subject.
Thanks, Inga. Yeah, so anyone who's been paying any attention to Bitcoin and the crypto space and SOV over the last week couldn't have failed to notice that there's been a massive disturbance in the force. And this was not unpredictable. And despite the fact that it was quite predictable that this would happen, it's worth talking about what happened, what it means, I think, for Sovryn, and for the world, and certainly crypto as a whole. So I think we should start with, actually before I get into that, I want to talk about this on a more general level briefly. So the entire crypto market has crashed. Bitcoin price crashed. Other prices have crashed more, as is typical in bear markets. And this has obviously also impacted the SOV price, as well as the trading on the Sovryn platform, which went way up. I think what's helpful in these situations is to zoom out. This has happened again and again and again. We've seen the same pattern. Nothing's changed. And despite the fact that there are always prognostications that this is going to change, I don't expect it will change anytime soon. We're going to continue to have these bull and bust cycles within Bitcoin and within the economy around it. And the reason is that when you're creating something highly innovative, highly future-oriented, it also brings with it a huge amount of uncertainty, a huge amount of people who don't understand what's going on, and a huge amount of speculation. And inevitably, that means that you have speculators who get ahead of themselves, which means that prices go outside or go stratospheric. They lose connection with reality. And it also means that you have a huge number of participants who don't have conviction, and so when there's a drawdown, the drawdown is much more severe and much more indiscriminate than it should be. But these are opportunities, right? So we have, bull markets, and they're extremely pleasant in many ways, and they are, for builders and projects, they are harvest season. That's when you can grow fastest. It's when you can raise money easiest, and most importantly, it's when you can attract users frequently most easily. But the more important season is planting season, is the winter period. And it is in that time that projects differentiate themselves, and that the projects that are building and have a real mission build and plant the seeds for the flourishing that will come next. There's no doubt in my mind that there is going to be not just one, but many more of these types of bull markets in the future. And our goal with Sovryn should be together to plant the seeds during the planting season so that we have greater and greater harvests each time. And I think this particular crash really validates the Sovryn thesis, which is that you can't build massive towers on rotten foundations. The reason that we're with Sovryn, the reason that we're building on Bitcoin is because we recognize that you need to build on the most solid, reliable foundations, that Bitcoin isn't technology, isn't software, it's permaware, and that Bitcoin is the only sound money, maybe in the world. It is in a class of its own. And that when you build a financial system, you have to build on sound money. One of the things that I've seen over the last few days is a huge number of people saying, okay, I understand now why I need to be only Bitcoin, and recognizing, the difference between the hype and solid foundations. And we started to even have some conversations with people who were developing projects in Terra and within the Terra ecosystem, who have reached out, at least to me, interested in what are the opportunities in building in the Sovryn ecosystem, what are the opportunities in building on solid financial foundations. So I think we are at a huge opportunity point for Sovryn. It's not going to pay off in the near term. I think it's very, very possible that we will see, a multi-year, and by multi-year I mean 18 months, 2 years of bear market as we have seen in the past. We're probably already 6 months into that, but this is the time where we're going to need to really differentiate ourselves and build out those products which are not built on Ponzinomics or unsustainable rewards, but are built on providing actual value. And I think this is a good time to differentiate and so talk about one of the big disadvantages of bull markets, which is usually goes unnoticed. The big disadvantage of bull markets is that you have really solid projects who are unwilling to take risks or unwilling to introduce mechanisms or mechanics that are unsound, struggling to compete with those projects that are short-term focused. In other words, the long-term builders lose out actually to the short-termists in bull markets. And a really cool example of this recently is MakerDAO. MakerDAO have been building what is one of the more decentralized stablecoins in the space for many, many years now. The MakerDAO project has a token called MKR, which really underperformed over the course of 2020 and particularly 2021. And then when UST and Luna exploded, the MKR price doubled, and that is sort of the reward that comes with building solid projects, because Maker and DAI managed to maintain their peg throughout this period. Liquidity, another project whose code we have reviewed and are utilizing to a great extent in Zero, managed to maintain their peg perfectly throughout all of this volatility. But they tend to ratchet up. The value of projects like that ratchet up cycle after cycle, whereas others ratchet down cycle after cycle. Okay, so let's get into the details of what actually happened and why it was inevitable. So there's a project called Terra, and Terra, for those of you who don't know, created a chain called Mir, which existed as part of the Cosmos ecosystem and became the dominant part of the Cosmos ecosystem. And they had a token called Luna, which could be burnt. If you burnt Luna, you could generate a stable coin called UST. And to encourage the usage of UST, if you lent your UST, you could earn 20% APY on a platform called Anchor. And what happened was people burnt huge amounts of Luna, causing the price of Luna to rise very, very dramatically, generated some close to $20 billion in UST, creating what was effectively, to the extent that you call it a stablecoin, one of the largest stablecoins and certainly the fastest growing stablecoin. And everything looked great for that ecosystem as it drained attention and funds away from other ecosystems, and a whole set of projects built around it. But there was an inherent problem there. And the inherent problem was that the process works in reverse. It's a symmetrical process. This is what's known as an algorithmic stablecoin. So when you have this like token which you can burn, and then its price goes up, and so it represents collateral for the stablecoin. But if you want to redeem the stablecoin, what you do is you generate those tokens, and you generate $1 worth of those tokens. The problem is that when the price starts dipping, or if people want to get rid of UST for whatever reason, then they start to redeem their UST. That causes the price of the so-called collateral, which doesn't actually have any inherent value, to begin to spiral down. And as that happens, the system becomes even further depegged, and then you have a dragon chasing its tail. The further the UST token lost its peg, the less value there was in Luna as more and more Luna inflation created. And in a period of just 2 days, we saw the circulating supply of Luna go from about 300 million tokens to I think now it's well over 2 billion tokens. Actually, I think it was now somewhere in the vicinity of 9 billion tokens. I've lost count. So there's not much of a lesson here, because it was inevitable to anyone who was looking at it. But there's a deeper lesson here, and the deeper lesson is that there's something very wrong with the way that we've been building out decentralized finance. The whole point of building out Bitcoin was to build out a sound money alternative to the existing monies. And the whole point of building decentralized financial systems around that is to build out the alternatives to our existing financial system, which is, everyone recognizes at this point, deeply corrupted. However, over the last 2 years, what we've seen is that the projects that have been developing in the DeFi space have become increasingly and fundamentally unsound. They've become highly speculative, risky, leverage projects that have huge amounts of hidden risks and not a lot of transparency The culture that has revolved around it has even come to call itself the degenerate culture. And this created a casino, but not a real economy. It created something which is very self-referential. But finance is extremely important. Regular people, regular businesses, regular efforts, regular innovation require the ability to save, to borrow, to lend, to seek credit, to get investment. So the big question is, how can we build a sound financial system? And in order to answer that, I think we need to recognize that there are two big problems in DeFi and in finance and really in governance in general. The first is most represented by the traditional financial world, right? In the traditional financial world, we have authorized regulators who are supposed to keep people safe. The SEC, for example, who tell you what you can and cannot invest in, supposedly to keep you safe. But what actually happens is agency capture. So these regulators become captured in various ways by special interests, and they actually become the enforcers of corruption rather than the enforcers of safety. There's another problem which exists also in the traditional financial world, but is even better represented in DeFi, which is moral hazard. The problem of moral hazard is that you have short-term centralized schemes that can become systemically important and effectively poison the entire system. And that is what happened with UST. UST became endemic. It became, the most important piece of collateral in the entire 100 billion Terra ecosystem, as well as the wider Cosmos ecosystem. It moved over in large quantities to various DeFi platforms on Ethereum and on Avalanche. And as a result, all of the projects that it touched became poisoned. And we've seen a number of other DeFi, quite a large number of other DeFi platforms have effectively exploded over the last week as a result. So what is moral hazard? Moral hazard is when you have the people who are introducing risks are not exposed to those risks and effectively can move those risks over to other people, which is exactly what we saw with UST as it infected more and more DeFi platforms. Okay, so we've got two problems. We've got agency capture and we've got moral hazard. And right now, there is only one project that I'm aware of, which is seeking to tackle both of these problems in DeFi. And that project is Sovryn. So I'll talk about agency capture first. Agency capture, remember, is this ability for special interests or agents to capture the central points of control within a system. And there are two ways to deal with that. One is not to have special interests, very, very difficult, and the other is to remove the incentives or the abilities to capture central points of control or remove the central points of control entirely. One of the broader problems with crypto and with DeFi is that outside of Bitcoin, very few people have thought about agency capture. For example, Ethereum is in the process of moving to proof of stake. Proof of stake is a system almost custom designed to create agency capture. And the way Ethereum operates, where there's what's known as MEV, or miner extractable value, where miners can front run users to make a lot of money and can reorder blocks if they have enough validation power, only enhances the problem. Now, it just so happens that this week, not only did UST collapse, but also a project called Lido became a single entity controlling 30% of Ethereum's stake. So that means that Lido, once Ethereum moves to proof of stake, will be in a position to be able to participate in MEV, make or have a great deal of influence on the roadmap of Ethereum, make changes frequently like EIP 1559, which changed the way Ethereum is minted. And when you have a proof-of-stake system which also relies on the issuance of new assets to the stakers, there's a high temptation to create various types of incentives, more or less complicated in their structure, to further reward the people who are dominant stakers. But that's not the only form of agency capture on Ethereum. An additional form of agency capture, which is worth noting, and this is also not the last one, but there's a number of examples. For example, Infura being a dominant node API provider. But there's also USDC, which is the stablecoin minted by a US firm called Circle. USDC has become the dominant form of collateral, not just in lending platforms like Aave and Compound, or leverage platforms, but also represents 50% of the collateral in the supposedly decentralized stablecoin MakerDAO. Now, imagine you have a scenario which happens not infrequently on Ethereum, where a decision needs to be made between two different forks, and USDC choose to move with one of those forks. It's very, very difficult for the rest of the community not to move with them, because the other fork will effectively have massively under-collateralized DeFi systems, right? Aave, MakerDAO, Compound, all of those systems would break on a fork without USDC. This creates a situation where USDC, and to a lesser degree Tether, can act as kingmakers within the Ethereum ecosystem. So there are various types of agency capture that exist not just in Ethereum. I'm just using Ethereum as an example because I actually think Ethereum, as ecosystems go, is one of the better ones. It exists everywhere. So how does Sovryn tackle this problem of agency capture? Well, I think Sovryn does this in a number of ways, and I think Sovryn is unique in trying to tackle agency capture. So one of the key ways, and obvious ways that we do this, is by building on Bitcoin. Bitcoin miners, especially when it comes to sidechains, are far less incentivized and have far less ability to participate in agency capture versus proof-of-stake validators. But it goes far beyond that. It also is the way that the sovereign ecosystem, or bitocracy, is governed. So bitocracy, even though it has stakers, is not a proof-of-stake system. It's a proof-of-commitment system, or POC. And the reason is that you don't just stake momentarily and gain voting power, but rather you have to place your stake at risk. You have to commit your stake for a long period of time. The longer you commit, the more voting power you have, but also the higher risk that you're taking, and the more your incentives are aligned not with the immediate situation, but with the long-term value of the ecosystem. This creates a different set of incentives, and it creates a set of incentives which is much more difficult to capture and which is much more aligned with the long-term value of the system. And then we can use that to also reduce other types of systemic risk and agency capture, which start to sound a little bit more like moral hazard. So, for example, there is no reliance on a centralized stablecoin in Sovryn, but it's more than that. As a ecosystem, we have chosen and to construct at great cost various methods to make sure that our ecosystem can never be infected by a single dominant stablecoin. So some of the examples of this are the utilization of XUSD and the ability for Sovryn as an ecosystem to choose which stable coins to allow in and which not. the introduction of the sovereign dollar will enhance our ability to do that. And we can, as a community, choose to effectively allow only the sovereign dollar to be utilized within Sovryn. And another example of this is the way that when assets are bridged over to Sovryn, they're aggregated. So, when you're using Sovryn, you don't see several different types of ETH coming across different bridges, but you see an aggregated ETH-S. Now, that actually isn't a mechanism for reducing risk. It's a mechanism for improving user experience, but it goes to demonstrate how if we operate as a self-regulatory regime, we can remove the potential for certain systemic problems, some of them user interface-based, but some of them risk-based within Sovryn. And Sovryn is unique as an ecosystem in that it has the center. Its center is not a new chain, but its center is a governance system. What makes the ecosystem is the governance system, and therefore, as an ecosystem, we can create a free market, but choose to have certain types of activity not be allowed within the system. And I think over time, as we continue to invest in this and as we continue as a community to educate ourselves around that, the differential between Sovryn as a self-regulating ecosystem and the other ecosystems will continue to increase. And this brings me to moral hazard. So over the course of the coming few years, there's going to be a lot of temptation, especially in bull markets, but always, to build various things or to allow various things in. For example, right now, there is a project called Blindex. Blindex is much more secure, much safer, and has far better design than the algorithmic UST. However, it still does have certain algorithmic properties which could potentially entail events, leads to the same kind of death spiral, the dragon chasing its tail that UST experienced. I think one of the cool things that we should do as a community is utilize the SIP process and utilize Bitocracy to make decisions about the types of risk we shall allow and the types of moral hazard that we will allow into the Sovryn platform. And I don't think that it's possible to build a sound financial system without this type of self-regulatory institutional infrastructure. And I think for that reason, one of the key things that we need to be doing, not just from a technological perspective, but from a cultural and institutional perspective over the next 2 years is improving the self-regulatory infrastructure that we have at Sovryn. And so I think that is how we keep Sovryn, staying Sovryn, and how we continue to differentiate as these risks and moral hazards become more and more apparent in other systems, differentiate Sovryn in the same way that Bitcoin has clearly differentiated itself, such that there is Bitcoin and everything else. So that was a bit more of a monologue than I was actually initially expecting to give. But as I was talking about, I thought there was quite a lot of background actually that was worth discussing. And at this point, I think maybe let's open it up to conversation.
Cool. I have a question that can maybe kick us off. Is there anything that you haven't mentioned already that could sort of ensure our stablecoin projects such as Zero going forward that they won't fall into the same pitfalls as UST?
Yes. So not only are there things like that, but these things have already been done in terms of the construction and design of these systems. So I don't believe that there can be any stablecoin which is really a stablecoin, which is, in other words, able to maintain stability to a peg, where you don't have full redeemability. This has been tried a million times in a million different ways. But every single time you lose the ability to have redeemability, you lose the peg eventually. And this is true in crypto, but it's even more true in the hundreds of years of experience that we have with the financial world. So sovereign dollar and the Zero Protocol are based not just on instant redeemability, but they're also, so instant is maybe a misleading word, but on-demand redeemability, but they're also able to preserve that on-demand redeemability utilizing over-collateralization and having an improved liquidation process through the stability pool when it comes to Zero. And when it comes to the sovereign dollar and the sovereign mint, the ability to have multiple different mechanisms, both for the creation of these type of over-collateralized stablecoins and multiple different methodologies of redemption, which makes the system even more robust. So we have proof points of this. Liquidity has managed to maintain through multiple different crashes, as well as MakerDAO, as well as Money on Chain, have all managed to maintain, because they are redeemable and over-collateralized, their peg, even in the worst crashes of May 21st, 2020, 2021, and now. And I expect that the sovereign dollar will be even more robust than them for two reasons. First of all, the fact that you have multiple methods of redemption and creation. And second, because the underlying collateral is Bitcoin, which is superior to all of the other forms of underlying collateral. So I think we can be extremely confident that what we have and what we'll be releasing will be on par with anything else out there and probably superior.
Thanks for that. Now I'm going to open the floor to our audience. So if anyone has questions, please raise your hand. I'll bring you up. And we can have you participate in the discussion. Okay, not all at once, everyone. Please raise your hand if you have anything to comment on regarding what Yago stated.
Or any questions about Luna and UST, or even the market right now more generally. And perhaps, Sovryn and how we as a community should be reacting to it.
Well, I guess I'll start with it's a little bit of a statement / my take on everything that was said. And it really just comes down to transparency and things like Luna trying to be algorithmic, stablecoin, not just not actually exchangeable, as you were saying. That's just, you can't avoid a real transparent system like that. You have to avoid the magic hand waving of an algorithm. Otherwise, it's just going to cause pain later to people.
Yes, so I think that's definitely true. But I think one of the problems that we've seen is that transparency isn't enough. Luna was extremely transparent, so transparent that anyone, who I think was an honest player and had taken a look at the system, recognized that this was its inevitable end. One of the key problems in finance and in sovereignty is information asymmetry. Free markets are great, but they have various failure modes. Moral hazard and agency capture are two of the failure modes of a free market. Additional failure modes include things like externalities. So, for example, when somebody buys a car and drives down the road, they create both noise and air pollution. They don't pay the price for that noise and that air pollution, but everyone else does, right? So you get to privatize the benefit, but you socialize the cost. That is an inherent property of any markets, not just free markets, but the important point here is that free markets don't escape it. An additional breakdown, which some people don't see as a flaw, they see it as a flaw in humans, but We're talking about systems that are built for humans, so I think it's worth thinking of it as a flaw of the system itself, is information asymmetry. And the problem with information asymmetry is frequently in economics referred to as the lemon problem, right? So one of the reasons that the moment you drive a car off the lot, it loses value is because from that moment on, nobody knows exactly what's happened to the car. You may have dented it and smashed it or broken something and replaced it or fixed it in a way that it looks fine, but actually isn't. And only you would know that. And so there's an inherent information asymmetry that you deal with. But information asymmetry can be more insidious and can be more subtle. And one of the forms of information asymmetry is that every single bull market we see a huge rush of people into the crypto space who have no idea what they're doing, and they have no real mechanism to spend the time to properly learn. Learning, doing your own research, becoming fully informed is an extremely expensive process, and it's simply not possible to imagine or expect everyone to be able to analyze every single thing deeply. And so the creators of any system typically have the advantage of information asymmetry on their side. So what are the mechanisms that we can use to reduce information asymmetry on a systemic basis within Sovryn? One of the ways that we can do that is by socializing the cost of that information asymmetry, but also socializing the benefit. So recently there was the formation of the Circle of Tokens, and the Circle of Tokens is designed to try and analyze the use of tokens, the use of rewards, and the risks that go with that in the Sovryn ecosystem. But what they do is, as they perform this analysis, they provide that analysis in a public way, so they can digest information and act as what is effectively a commons, a public service within the Sovryn ecosystem. And then the Bitocracy, because they are incentivized to make good long-term decisions, can digest for the larger body of users the recommendations of the circle and vote on the basis of that. So the great thing about the Bitocracy is what it does is it allows a certain number of people to be incentivized through the ability to earn what the protocol earns, to make good decisions for the protocol, for the ecosystem as a whole, which then get socialized, right? Get distributed basically to all of the users. And so when we're thinking about how do we avoid systemic risks system, the importance is that we pass it to the and then and vote, highly informed voting on the basis of that. There are additional things that we can do. For example, the introduction of prediction markets, and this is a topic in and of itself, but effectively you can create additional incentives around providing even hidden information, utilizing like future markets where you bet on what will happen if certain things happen. So you could bet on, what would happen to the SOV price if we decided to introduce UST. And the people who are well informed, they have a high degree of certainty of what will happen, and so they can bet against it. They could say that the SOV price would go down if that were to happen. And in doing so, they can effectively, we can outsource things which would usually need to be a SIP to a purely incentive-based market. So there is work at this point, only research level, being done on how we can introduce as an additional sort of house, right? Like you've got Congress and the Senate, you could have Bitocracy and a prediction market, and they could reinforce each other. So when we talk about, creating the nation of sovereigns, which is able to self-regulate, it is these kinds of institutional tools which can allow us to make sure that we can fight back against, we love free markets. We know what their flaws are and how we can rebalance or fight back against the flaws in free markets with the right set of incentive structures. Because basically a marketplace is just a set of rules. It's a protocol. And if you can structure those protocols well, you can reduce or mitigate a lot of the inherent problems that come with information asymmetry, moral hazard, etc.
Awesome. We had Manuel invited to the stage.
Hi, thank you. Hi, Iago. I have two questions. One is, you think we will get in a point where people that is coming to crypto is not coming for the gains and they come and dump the projects and more for what crypto is willing to give to the people, the freedom? And the second part is, if you think we will get in a point where it's more user-friendly but keeping the security and uncentralized projects? Thank you.
Yeah, I think the answer to both of those is yes. So first of all, I think we're already starting to see with Bitcoin that the vast majority of users are not traders. They are utilizing Bitcoin for at least one longer-term purpose, which is as a long-term store of value. So people, sometimes make fun of Bitcoin. How can it be a store of value? It's up 50%, down 50% in a matter of months. But over longer time frames, it acts as an extremely powerful, the best store of value in the world. Now, if you look at the way UTXO sets have been changing, in other words, the way people have been transacting with with Bitcoin, we've seen two things. First of all, we've seen a significant reduction of the percentage of Bitcoin that exists on exchanges. They've been withdrawn from exchanges on an ongoing basis. And the second is we've seen accounts that don't move. In other words, holdings of Bitcoin that don't move increase, so that now some 70% of Bitcoin hasn't moved in at least 6 months. Some 60% of Bitcoin hasn't moved in at least a year. Those are remarkable numbers. And in point of fact, most of the excitement seems to, what gets the attention is the trading, but the trading represents a relatively small part of the market right now for Bitcoin. I think the next step in that is giving people tools which allow them to do more than just hold, but also allow them to use Bitcoin in transactional fashion. We started to see quite remarkable growth in Lightning Network. We started to see adoption, unfortunately, primarily of custodial Lightning Network wallets, but we've started to see more of that as well. We've seen some increases in the use of coin mixers and other privacy tools for Bitcoin. And the goal of Sovryn is to introduce an even wider array of tools, like the ability to borrow against your Bitcoin, the ability to earn yield on Bitcoin, the ability to create stable coins against Bitcoin and use those for payments both on Rootstock and on Lightning Network and on other platforms as well. And I think that as these tools are introduced and become more useful, we will start to see Bitcoin move even less frequently in many ways, but the economic value of that Bitcoin start to move far more frequently. So, for example, you can imagine people who open lines of credit with zero, their Bitcoin wouldn't move at all, but the funds, the stable coins that they generate, could be used for payments and could create an entire economy and circulate within an economy with a high degree of frequency. We've also started to see, or not started to see, we've continued to see broader and broader adoption of Bitcoin on every single level. And so I think all of those things are playing together. Then with regards to the UI and the user experience, I think it's improving across the board and will continue to do so. But I think that decentralized systems have an inherent advantage over centralized systems. Centralized systems have to deal with the regulations in 200 different countries. That's a huge amount of overhead. They have the friction and the annoyance and the attack on privacy that KYC, AML represent, as well as the frictions that introduces. And they don't have the easy flow of funds between different systems that you have when you have, a standardized system that can work globally, like Sovryn, like Bitcoin, like Lightning Network. So I think, over the last few years, we saw more of a move towards decentralized services, even without significant Ponzi-nomics or incentives. Uniswap, for example, has become one of the largest exchanges in the world, partially to Ponzi-nomics, but certainly less than most other projects. And to a great extent, that was because even certainly before Ethereum's fees became very high, it was really a super convenient way to transact. And I think that's just the first example, sort of like a testnet example in many ways, a proof of concept of what is to come. And I think the big advantage that we have with Sovryn in building out tools is that any tool that we build out and deploy is immediately available with very little friction to everyone, and will actually probably become, over time, embedded directly into many different wallets.
So we're about 90 minutes in, and I just want to be conscious of time. Do we want to keep this going, Iago, or should we cap it at the 90-minute mark?
I think if there's one or two more questions, we could take them. If not, I think it was. I'd be interested to know whether or not this was a good format. So if people want to DM me or comment, I'd be interested to know. So yeah, one or two more questions, or we can wrap it up.
Cool. So last call for anyone who wants to jump in, ask a question or comment on maybe what they learned from this call. Do they not support the SIP? And why? And yeah, we'd love to just leave this last minute for feedback if anyone has.
I can say thank you because it's really a nice way to learn from someone that knows so much from crypto. And if it's not too much to ask, I want to see what is your opinion of ADA and what they are doing in the ecosystem, Iago?
There's something I find really curious about Cardano, or ADA is their token. I think that's what you're referring to, right, Manuel?
Yes. Sorry, I say ADA.
So there's something really interesting about that, which is, as far as I can tell, it's basically vaporware. But Charles and the rest of the Cardano team have managed to create a community which is extremely
passionate
about a long-term vision, about a vision which probably I don't know, maybe will never come, right? And are sort of, there are promises about what will be rather than what is. Now, I don't think Sovryn should ever become a project which is focused solely on what will be rather than what is, but we do have a long mission ahead of us, and we need to have long-term partners. And I'm not sure exactly how they've managed to create that type of deep interest in the long term. And I'd be very interested in your guys' views if you have thoughts on what it is that allows it to happen, because there might, we try to learn from everyone. We've adopted in Sovryn, we've adopted Solidity, we've adopted tooling, and we've adopted we've shamelessly stolen smart contract code from other projects which we were impressed by. And I think we can also look to learn and steal shamelessly from the best parts, even of projects that we don't necessarily like. And I think Cardano have something very interesting and special there, and I haven't managed to figure out exactly how they've accomplished that. One other project which I'd also point out, which has done something similar, which is Ripple, because Ripple's been vaporware since 2013, and somehow they have managed to also create, a following focused on something which is going to happen across the rainbow and over the horizon. And I think if we can, do that on a broader basis, because both of those projects have more attention than Sovryn. If we can do that on a broader basis for the important mission that we're engaged in, I think there are learnings there.
Yeah, for me, it's like they treat it like a religion. It doesn't matter what you say; they are always in the right.
Well, I don't think that's what we want to learn from them.
And maybe that's what I get from them.
Yeah.
I'm not so tech guy, but I ask questions and they don't know how to answer, and only say because it's good. Okay.
Yeah. I think maybe to an extent, sort of the extreme information asymmetry in a religion can play well, because there's nothing you can never have, nothing breaks the information asymmetry if what's going to happen is always happening in the future. So you can't disprove anything. And so there might be some, there is a certain power to being just vaporware, or being always something which is going to happen in the future. But I'd like to believe that there's something more there.
Thank you.
There's one additional request.
Yes, we
Neo.
do.
I think we can if Neo wants to ask his question, and then we can wrap up after that.
Okay, sure. Neo, if you'd like to ask a question.
Yeah, now more than a question, it's a comment to the last comment about Cardano. I'm a Bitcoin only now, but I was a little bit involved in Cardano because, like to many others, it caught my eye. Kind of like they have a great marketing scheme. So I was kind of like willing to put my toe in the water, and also I saw it like as a learning opportunity just to compare, right? And I kind of like downloaded the wallet and downloaded the app. They have an app, like a voting app. I don't remember the name right now, but what's interesting is that I think the main difference for that person that asked the question is that proof of stake and proof of work, I think that's the main differentiation. And when you get to understand proof of stake, all the projects in that app, right, they approve which projects are going to be developed by the development team, which ones are going to be funded, right? What happens is those that have a larger stake have a large vote, right? So in my case, like I live in the U.S., and everybody has a vote, right? And that's what I like about Bitcoin. I mean, you can be a billionaire like Ricardo Salinas, or you can be someone who owns $1,000 in Africa, and you all have the same, power to influence the network, right? But with the proof of stake, what happened is you voted for, let's say, I voted these projects to be funded, but your vote is not worth as much as others that have a larger stake. So basically, those that have more ADA coins are the ones that decide, which projects will be funded. So to me, when I really understood how it worked, right? And then you hear all this from Bitcoin maxis, like, proof of stake, it's just like Fiat 2.0, and you hear all this rhetoric, right? But when you really understand, that's when it brings me back to Bitcoin 100%, because I just needed to validate that. And I don't know if that answers a little bit, but yeah, sometimes it's worth digging a little bit just to compare. And, at the end of the day, I think the innovation is Bitcoin, and, all the other projects that try to sell you that they do it a little bit better or more sustainable or faster. I mean, they're just trying to, I don't want to call it scams, but most of them are, for real.
Neo, you were mentioning earlier that you thought they had really great marketing and really, meant, I don't know, great communications. What would you say do you think are the key, are the great things that they did from a marketing perspective, which allowed them to build out the loyal following that they have?
Yeah, I think what happens is they have let's be real here. Charles Hoskinson is a great speaker. You listen to him and he knows his stuff. He's been involved in Bitcoin in the beginning, then in Ethereum and Ethereum Classic, and now, so he knows his stuff, right? So I think what happened is they have a lot of young, enthusiastic kids that do really good marketing. I mean, you can follow like 10 of them and you'll see like they constantly, they have great followings, and they give constantly positive, uplifting tones. But what I realize is that they're always promising, right? Like this is gonna be happening. Now they're saying like in June something great is gonna happen, and they start like bombarding, Twitter and other platforms with that, and they pump the price. They pump the price, right? And then what happens is I think that's what they do, and I wouldn't go as far as saying that it's a scam, because they have otherwise they would have not survived all these years. But what I think what happens is, at the end of the day, for me, Charles Hoskinson is a point of failure, right? So it's a community that depends on one big personality, like Duke Kwon, I don't want to compare, but so what I like about Bitcoin is that you don't depend on anyone, right? If tomorrow, somebody that's very influential disappears, I mean, Bitcoin's going to just continue its, because it's truly decentralized, network, right? But with Cardano, they depend a lot in Charles Hoskinson, and he's a great speaker. He keeps the troop motivated, and one thing he does very well, and sorry for the long answer, is that if you follow Charles' YouTube channel, he's really good at seeing what's trending, right? It could be XRP, it could be this, and then he records a video with his thoughts, and he strategically answers it in a way that makes people say, oh, this guy, he's really on top of this, he knows his stuff. So he has that touch. He has a touch. I won't deny that. But he's using this trending topics, right? And then very subtle, he always ends with Bitcoin. It was the beginning. It was great, but now it's time for 3.0, right? Basically, this is a grandfather. Now is the time for the prince to take over the kingdom, and so basically they pass on that mentality to all the followers, that Cardano is almost like a following of Bitcoin in a way. I don't think they hate Bitcoin, but they truly believe that they are a continuation, that a more upgraded form of money. They truly believe that, and I think it's so ingrained in their community. That's what makes them. And the other thing is they all stake. I think they have like over 70% of stakes. So what happened is they earn, let's say 5-6%, right, on their stake holdings. So that kind of like it's an incentive. And I know Sovryn also have stake, but I don't really fully understand how the staking works with Cardano, but I know that that's another reason why Cardano holders are long-term holders, right? You do have a lot of smart money and Wall Street type of funds that come in and speculate, but they have a strong base, of long-term holders, and I think that's one of insurance policy that they have, that they always gonna have a minimum, right? So yeah, that's kind of a long answer. I'm sorry for all of it, but that's has been my experience and my view. I don't know what you think about that.
No, I think that what you said makes a lot of sense, you've probably convinced me to watch some Charles Hoskinson videos on YouTube. So there goes a few hours of my life.
Don't get hooked. Don't get hooked, because for real, I mean, it can have like a hypnosis type of effect.
He's really good.
So he's really good. You have to really, but I know you're smart, Yago, and you can differentiate, the market.
I know Charles personally, so I think his magic. He's very sexy, but his magic is not going to impact me maybe in the same way. All right, guys, let's bring this to a boil. Thanks very much, Neo, Ferric, Satoshi Badger, Manuel, and everyone else who participated. Ingemar, over to you.
Sure. Yeah, just to reiterate. Wait, can you guys hear me? Can you hear my microphone? Okay.
Yeah.
I think I'm coming in now. So, all right, thanks, everybody. Stay sovereign. Thanks for your questions and your wonderful feedback. And be on the lookout for the community call on next Thursday. So stay sovereign, everyone, and have a good weekend.
Thank you. Stay sovereign.